Hello everybody. Today we'll be starting the second session on reproductive physiology, that is the puberty and menopause, where after the session we'll be able to explain the hormonal changes during puberty, the possible theories regarding the onset of puberty, and the changes which occur during puberty in male and female, and a short discussion about the pubertal abnormalities, and we will briefly know about menopause and climatery. So with this learning objectives, let us proceed to the puberty. Now, puberty, as we all know, is a stage in the life of individual when the males and the females undergo physical, physiological, and psychological changes to reach the sexual maturity. Before puberty, definitely the reproductive organs, the external genitalia, all are developed, but they are not mature enough to function for the reproduction. So it is the physiological transition from childhood to reproductive maturity, which we call as puberty. And puberty is associated, as we know, with the growth spurt and also appearance of primary and secondary sexual characteristics. Now, the age of onset of puberty is highly variable from individual to individual, but usually in girls it occurs between 8 to 14 years of age, and in males between 9 to 14 years. This is the average age of onset of puberty, and that it is about 4.5 years average it takes to complete the entire process of puberty. Now, during puberty, there are two main physiological events in terms of hormonal changes that lead to the puberty. One is gonadarchy, the other is adrenarchy. So what is gonadarchy? By gonadarchy, we mean the activation of gonads. And this is under the influence of HPG axis, that is the hypothalamo-pituitary gonadal axis. Now, at the onset of puberty, we know there is pulsatile secretion of GnRH hormone, gonadotrophin releasing hormone, which in turn leads to the stimulation of gonadotropes, releasing FSH and LH, the follicle stimulating hormone, and the luteinizing hormone from anterior pituitary. And they are responsible for the gonadal maturation and finally the production of the gonadal hormones, that is the estrogen in case of female and testosterone in case of male. And they are finally responsible for bringing down the pubertal changes in females and male. But not only the gonadal hormones, it is the adrenal hormones, the adrenal androgens, which are also responsible for the pubertal changes. So this is known as adrenarchy, when due to the activation of HPA axis, hypothalamo-pituitary adrenal axis, which is definitely active during childhood as well, but during puberty there is adequate secretion of adrenal steroids, sex steroids, and they bring about certain secondary sexual characteristics to appear. Now, thus, if we look at the HPG axis in male before and after puberty, we'll see that initially there is a prenatal spurt in the puberty, as we all know, especially in male under the influence of SRY gene, that the testis develops and the testosterone develops. And then there is a postnatal or neonatal spurt during the 2 to 4 months. This is not only due to the activation of the HPG axis, but the increased Leydig cell activity in male embryo and in the neonatal life is under the influence of maternal HCG, whose beta subunit is very similar to the luteinizing hormone secreted from anterior pituitary. Now then After infancy, as it reaches the childhood, we see both the hypothalamic and the pituitary hormones, the gonadotrophins and the gonadotrophin releasing hormones, maintain a very low level during the childhood. And then there is a pubertal spurt. With the onset of puberty, we see that the basal level, the amplitude, and the uh, frequency of GnRH pulse, as well as the level of the gonadotrophic hormones, the LH and FSH, they rise sharply. And so our question is, what is the cause of this quiescence during childhood and a spurt which leads to the onset of puberty at the beginning of the pubertal changes? So if we look at the HPG axis, then we'll see that during prenatal and early postnatal life, that is between 8-week intrauterine to 2 to 4 months of postnatal life, the HPG axis is hyperactive, and it contributes, as we all know, to the sexual differentiation. Now then, during childhood, there is a quiescent phase. That is, GnRH and the gonadotrophins are maintaining a very low level. This is because that hypothalamus is extremely sensitive to very low levels of circulating estradiol and testosterone. And so these small levels of estradiol and testosterone produced from immature gonads keep the hypothalamic pituitary axis under suppression. Now, during the pubertal transition between 9 to 12 years of age, we see that there is a sudden spurt in the basal GnRH, the frequency and the amplitude of the GnRH secretion, leading to a rise in the gonadotrophic secretion. And it is seen that the earliest event in puberty is the onset of pulsatile secretion of GnRH. So our question remains that why there is a quiescence, or why the hypothalamus was so very sensitive to the low levels of estradiol and testosterone at childhood, and who makes this reduction in the sensitivity so that at the onset of puberty there is a sudden spurt of basal GnRH level and leading to a pulsatile secretion of GnRH. This pulsatile secretion of GnRH is very important because it is seen that if there is continuous infusion of the GnRH given, then we see that there is no pubertal changes occurring in individuals, and this is often utilized in the prostatic carcinoma, where if we give infusion or sustained injections of GnRH, long-term GnRH injection, then they keep the gonadotrophins under suppression, and there is no further increase in the prostatic malignancy. Now, let us have a brief look at the HPA and HPG axis in adults and what are their interactions. Now, it is from the posterior paraventricular nucleus of hypothalamus that which predominates in the CRH neuron, that is the corticotrophin releasing hormone, which pour the corticotrophin releasing hormone into the hypothalamo-hypophyseal portal system at the median eminence. Similarly, at the preoptic area and the arcuate nucleus, there are predominance of the GnRH neuron. Preoptic area is mainly responsible for secretion of LH, whereas arcuate nucleus governs the secretion of FSH. So these areas which have predominant GnRH neuron also pour their secretion into the thalamo-hypophyseal portal system at the median eminence. And they respectively affects the corticotrophs and gonadotrophs in the anterior pituitary, and the Under the influence of corticotroph, it is the secretion of adrenocorticotrophic hormone, which leads to the maturation and stimulation of adrenal cortex, leading to secretion of glucocorticoids, the mineralocorticoids, and the sex steroids. On the other hand, under the influence of GnRH, it is the gonadotrophs, the LH and FSH, which is secreted from the anterior pituitary, and they will lead to the development of gonads, that is the ovary and the testis, and finally secretion of gonadal hormones, that is estrogen, progesterone in female, or testosterone in male. Now we see that adequate level of estrogen, progesterone, or testosterone will lead to inhibition of anterior pituitary as well inhibition of preoptic area, which in turn is being inhibiting the arcuate area. The interesting thing to note is that the glucocorticoids or the sex steroids, which are secreted from adrenal cortex, also has a negative feedback on the anterior pituitary and the posterior paraventricular nucleus of hypothalamus, but they also has a negative feedback on the GnRH neuron. That is why during the situations of stress or anxiety, we have certain menstrual abnormalities or cessation of menstruation, and this is due to this inhibitory pathway of the glucocorticoids or the stress hormones, which leads to inhibition of the GnRH neuron. Now, coming to the theories of onset of puberty. As we have questioned that what makes the HPG axis very much quiescent during the childhood, and then who makes this again active or hyperactive during the onset of puberty. Several theories have been put forward. Some are established. More are being worked upon to be established in human as yet, but they can be stated as follows. Now, the onset of puberty is said to be a programmed schedule of expression of genes. It is a programmed schedule, and this expression of gene will lead to expression of several neurotransmitters, which will act on the matured hypothalamic neuronal circuitry to bring about the pubertal changes. So before puberty, it is already the hypothalamic neuronal circuitry that have matured, and now due to the programmed schedule, there is expression of certain genes leading to secretion of several neurotransmitters, and this complex activity of these neurotransmitters will bring about the onset of puberty. And it is very obvious to note that often the mother and the sibling has similar age of onset, telling that it has a strong genetic predisposition. Now, in the childhood, that is after the gonadotrophic burst in early infancy, we see that there is dominant inhibitory neurotransmitter tone in hypothalamus. That is the inhibitory neurotransmitter like gamma-aminobutyric acid, GABA, is more predominant in the preoptic area. It is the KNDY neuron on the arcuate nucleus. Now, KNDY means kisspeptin, neurokinin B, and dynorphin, of which dynorphin is a strong inhibitory neurotransmitter on the arcuate nucleus during childhood. And it is the neuropeptide Y on the peripheral signals, by which we mean, say, the signal like leptin from the white adipose tissue. And this leptin is again a strong stimulator of the onset of puberty. So this leptin as well is kept being inhibited, and the secretion of the gonadotrophin from the gonadotrophin releasing hormone from arcuate and the preoptic areas are being kept under restraint. The GnRH neuron are kept under restraint by this dominant inhibitory neurotransmitters like GABA or dynorphin or NPY, which actually inhibits the kisspeptin neuron. So at present time, it is the kisspeptin neuron which is given the most prominence to bring about the puberty. That is, the kisspeptin neuron is the most important pulse generator of hypothalamic neurons to secrete the GnRH pulse. And the disinhibition of this kisspeptin neuron, which were kept inhibited, this disinhibition of kisspeptin neuron is the key component for the regulation of the hypothalamic pulse generation of GnRH. But last but not the least is the critical fat mass by the white adipose tissue is another essential factor which triggers the onset of puberty. And it is seen that the role of leptin is as a physiological link between the adipose tissue energy store and the reproductive functioning. So it is seen that unless and until a boy or a girl attains a critical fat mass, he does not attain puberty. So in case of athletes who maintain the fat mass to a lower level, or in individuals with anorexia nervosa, we see that they have a delayed onset of puberty. So now the neural circuitry for the control of puberty. Now this is the GnRH neuron with the glial cells influencing it by some paracrine secretions. And this GnRH neuron drops its secretion into the hypothalamo-hypophyseal portal system. It secretes the hormone and which reaches the anterior pituitary. Now, this neuron is under the influence of several neurotransmitters, some of which are stimulatory. Those in blue, these are the stimulatory neurotransmitters, whereas those in red are the inhibitory neurotransmitters. The stimulatory ones, as I told you, is very important, is the kisspeptin, KIS1, then neurokinin B, then glutamate, then norepinephrine. They all stimulate the GnRH neuron for the pulsatile secretion. Whereas the dynorphin, acting on the KNDI receptors, or the GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid, then endogenous opioids, or the RF amide related peptides. These are strong inhibitory neurons that influences the GnRH secretion. So during childhood, these inhibitory neuronal tone takes the upper hand, suppressing the stimulatory neurons, especially the kisspeptin. But at the onset of puberty, due to the neuronal maturation and due to the genetic expression of several neurotransmitters, stimulatory neurotransmitters, we see that the suppression is overcome and there is stimulation of GnRH neuron for the pulsatile secretion. And one interesting thing, as we have already said, is the white adipose tissue secreting leptin, which has a strong stimulatory influence, or it inhibits the GABA secretion and causes the pulsatile secretion of GABA as well as NPY. It is inhibited by NPY, so it overcomes the GABAminergic tone and the NPY and causes stimulation of the GnRH neuron for the pulsatile secretion. Now, this is the another picture of a bit complicated picture of this neural control, where this we see is the GnRH neuron secreting the GnRH, pulsatile secretion of GnRH to affect the gonadotrophs in the anterior pituitary. And throughout this GnRH neuron, we see that there are kisspeptin receptors which are stimulatory to the GnRH secretion. Now, there are two predominant neurons, one at the preoptic area, which is being shown here. This is the kisspeptide neuron. Now, this is secreting kisspeptin, which is highly stimulatory to the GnRH neuron, but this is kept inhibited in the childhood by the gonadotrophin inhibitory neuron, and which is strongly secreting the GABA. So this kisspeptin neuron is strongly under the influence of GABA, as well as inhibitory neurotransmitters like NPY, which is inhibiting the leptin action on the kisspeptin neuron, and also the endogenous opioids. And there are also the stimulatory ones like glutamate, norepinephrine, or dopamine, which influences the action of the kisspeptin neuron. On the other hand, in the arcuate nucleus or in the infundibular nucleus, there is the KNDY neuron. As we have already said, K stands for kisspeptin, N for neurokinin B, and DY for dynorphin. So these three neurotransmitters, the balanced output of these three neurotransmitters will lead to the activity of KNDY receptors. Neurons, sorry. Now, this kisspeptin, we see, is one of the important stimulatory secretion to the GnRH. Neurokinin B is also stimulatory, but they are both kept inhibited during childhood by the dynorphin neurotransmitter, which is keeping the KNDY neuron under suppression. And once this dynorphin inhibition is lost, then under the influence of neurokinin B and the kisspeptin, that there is activation of the GnRH neuron. And it is seen that during stress or during excess of E2 or testosterone, there is a negative feedback on this KNDY neuron, mainly acting through the dynorphin. Okay. Now, so once this inhibitory interneuron or GnIH or the dynorphin, they are being inhibited, they reduce their tone. It is the neurokinin B and kisspeptin which takes upper hand in the arcuate nucleus, and kisspeptin in the preoptic nucleus, which leads to the increased pulsatile secretion of the GnRH neuron, leading to the increased secretion of gonadotrophic hormones from anterior pituitary. Now, so there are complex activity of the neurotransmitters, which is under the genetic influence, and there is a very subtle tone between the inhibitory and the stimulatory neurotransmitters, which bring about the pubertal changes or the onset of puberty in male or female individual. Now let's come to the pubertal changes in female. Now, these are the stages of pubertal changes which occur in female, and as I told you, it requires 4.5. The range is between 1.5 to 6 years to complete the entire process of puberty. Now, the first change in puberty is thelarche, that is the breast development, which occurs under the influence of estrogen, estradiol hormone E2. And so we know that before this thelarche, that is the first change in the onset of puberty, already the HPG axis is active and there is adequate secretion of estrogen. This approximately average age of onset is plus minus 10 years, which is the first sign of puberty. And there are Tanner stages. If you're interested, we can give the Tanner stages to you. The second stage is the adrenarche, which we have already discussed is under the influence of adrenal androgen, and the pubertal changes which occur during this is development of pubic and axillary hairs. Pubic hairs usually appear 1 year after the thelarche, and the axillary hair is the actually final change in the secondary sexual characteristics, that is the SSC. This is a typographical mistake. You should take it as SSC, that is the secondary sexual characteristics or secondary sexual changes. So the appearance of axillary hair is occurring much later as a secondary sexual characteristics. Hand in hand with adrenarche goes the growth spurt. So during this time, both male and female, they undergo accelerated growth. In female, it should be about 6 to 11 centimeters per year, and this is under the influence of growth hormone and the estrogen. And you'll be knowing that estrogen influences the epiphyseal closure And so as the estrogen rises early in female, so the female height attained is a bit less than that of the males. So the growth hormone as well as estrogen has a role in attaining the final height or the growth spurt in female during puberty. And last but the most important change, pubertal change in female, is the menarche. That is the appearance of first menstruation. The average age is plus minus 12 years, 9 to 17.7 years is the age of appearance of menarche, and this is due to the mid-pubertal estrogen surge, which will lead to the LH surge, and the menarche will start. So these are the important stages of pubertal changes in female. To come to the, this is the Tanner scale. I'm not discussing it in details. Now coming to the pubertal changes in male. There are several physical changes, like there are increase in height under the influence of testosterone hormone, and as estrogen come late in male, so they attain a greater height. Then body becomes more muscular, and typical muscular male distribution of muscles, the development of torso, these are seen in case of male individual with a progression of puberty. Then there are facial hair growth, the mustaches and the beard, and the accessory hair growth in other places. Then deepening of voice and the oily secretion in the sebaceous glands, leading to the acne formation. Now, in the physiological changes, we know that under the influence of the adrenal androgen as well as the testosterone from the gonads, that there are development of the reproductive organ, and there is production of sperms and seminal fluid. And emotional change is very important, and that is seen more in males than in females. That is, they are being attracted to opposite sex. They like to have their own life, own domain, and to mix with their peers, and they have mood swings and some unpredictable emotions. Now, the timing of pregnancy is again very important factor for the psychological changes during puberty. And it is just the opposite in case of girls and boys. In girls, we see that if there is early onset of puberty, early maturation, then they become somewhat withdrawn. They have a lack of confidence, and they have a negative body image. So they don't want to come in up front, forefront, give leadership, and they become withdrawn and unpopular. Boys, on the other hand, early puberty gives them confidence, they become popular, and they have a positive body image. On the other hand, late maturing gives girls the maturity, so they become popular, sociable, even they have the leadership quality, they come forward, and they have a positive body image. On the other hand, in boys, this delayed puberty makes them anxious, they are attention seeking, they become unpopular with a negative body image. So this pubertal development has a very important psychological effect on the individual as well. Now coming to certain very short discussion about certain abnormalities of puberty. Now puberty may be early, the precocious puberty, it may be delayed, the late puberty, and it may be incomplete. And in the precocious puberty, it is important to note that girls, if they have the onset of puberty below 8 years or boys below 9 years, then they are said to be precocious sexual development. And they can again be grouped under two. That is, in the first group, they are gonadotropin dependent. That is the gonadotropin releasing hormone for hypothalamus or the gonadotropin from pituitary. That is the HPG axis matures early. And that is an gonadotropin dependent precocious puberty. And if the peripheral gonads, that is the testis or the ovary, matures early or secretes the sex hormones independent of the gonadotrophin, then they will lead to the precocious pseudo-puberty, which is a peripheral one or gonadotrophin independent one. And this may be also due to the adrenal steroids. And then we come to the incomplete puberty and the delayed onset of puberty. Girls beyond 13 years of age, if they don't have the onset of puberty, or boys, the onset of puberty is delayed beyond 14 years of age, then they are said to be the delayed onset of puberty. Now, in precocious puberty, as we said, the age of onset is important, and the central or gonadotropic dependent one is isosexual, either male or female, whereas peripheral one may be isosexual or heterosexual, like in the adrenal hyperplasia. If it occurs in male, there is not much changes, but in female, there may be virilizing effect. So it is a heterosexual one. And a combined one, that is, if early they have peripheral increase in the hormones, they will lead to induced maturation of the HPG axis, and that triggers the onset of central puberty. So later it becomes a combined one. So the central precocious puberty, the major cause is idiopathic. It is also not very commonly known and is very common in female. Male is to a female. Sorry, the ratio has been altered. It should be 1:3. That is, female have a more common incidence of early central precocious puberty, and this is true gonadotrophin dependent on the HPG axis. And in certain cases, which are not idiopathic, certain organic brain lesions or environmental factors may lead to early maturation of the HPG axis. Few causes of the peripheral precocious puberty. McCune-Albright will come to the discussion just after this slide. Congenital adrenal hyperplasia, as we all know, due to certain enzyme defects, the steroid biosynthesis is defective, and in certain cases, there is increased adrenal androgens leading to the formation of testosterone and estrogen. So these will lead to adrenal hyperplasia, maybe having virilizing or the feminizing effect. Then the ovarian or testicular tumors then will lead to increased secretion of ovarian or testicular hormone independent of the gonadotrophin. They usually have very low levels of LH and FSH, and so they may be a peripheral cause of precocious puberty. And the last but not the least cause is if the individuals are given exogenous or external estrogen or androgen, they may develop peripheral gonadotrophin independent precocious pseudo-puberty. Now, McCune-Albright, it is a congenital disease, more frequently in girls, where we see precocious puberty with the cystic changes in bone and caffeolate patches in the skin. This is a very disturbing disease where cystic changes ultimately lead to death. But the puberty is precocious because of autonomous production of estrogen. There is a defect in the ovarian steroid genesis, and so FSH, LH levels are very low, and it is the testosterone oral tablets which may help to inhibit the ovarian steroidogenesis. Now, a short slide on the delayed puberty occurs usually in 3% of children and mostly in male, because this is constitutional in males, and it is 63% which may occur in boys. Delayed puberty, less common and often organic in girls, and due to the delayed puberty, there may be certain psychological problem, as we are already discussing upon the age of onset of puberty and even the defect in reproduction. Now, a very brief discussion about the menopause. Now, according to WHO definition, the 2004, we see natural menopause is permanent cessation of the menstruation resulting from loss of ovarian follicular activity over a period of 12 months, that is consecutive 12 months. If you are having amenorrhea, then you know that there is natural menopause. Climacteric, on the other hand, is a more protracted period, including the pre and perimenopause. So it is defined as the phase of aging in women where there is a decline in the gonadal responsiveness to the gonadotrophin stimulation of the gonads. And this occurs after 5th decade. in both male and female. It is more obvious in female, and in male also there is a decline in the sperm count. At the 20 years of age, when 6.5 billion of sperm will be produced per gram of tissue, in after fifth decade it declines to 3.8 billion per gram of tissue, testicular tissue per day. So we see that there is a decline in the aging men and women, but it is more protracted in case of females. And in females, it is starting from the perimenopausal to the postmenopausal group, which is termed as climacteric. Now, what are the physiological changes in menopause? We see that there are changes in brain and in the hypothalamus and in the ovary in females. Now, what happens to brain is they have mood swings, they have loss of memory, and that is due to several genetic factors, lifestyle, and if they have any systemic disease. In the ovary, we find that there is decreased ovarian follicular mass and the ovarian function, that is the defective estradiol secretion, fluctuation, and gradual decline in the estradiol, and decline in the antimullerian hormone inhibin, which all influences the negative feedback to the pituitary. That is, the negative feedback is lost. Now the FSH starts increasing. This increase in FSH is a very important marker of menopause. Now, due to hypothalamic aging, we see that there is desynchronized GnRH secretion and impaired timing of LH surge, and this finally leads to the anovulatory cycles and finally the loss of menstrual cycle. So these changes, physiological changes, will bring about the menopause in the individual. Now, in female, there are 4 stages of menopause. Premenopause, where the prominent symptoms are cramps, anxiety, mood swings, irritability, and sometimes nausea. In perimenopause, the mood swing remains and the hot flashes begin. And hot flashes and night sweats are important, vaginal dryness, and definitely the periods become irregular. During menopause, gradually the periods decline and hot flashes increase and there is loss of libido. And when you have amenorrhea for more than 1 year, 12 months, consecutive 12 months, because it's postmenopausal period, when there is increased risk of certain conditions like osteoporosis, because we know that female hormone has an important effect on the matrix development in bones, then the coronary artery disease risk increases and there are increased urinary tract infection. So we find that there are several changes in the menopause as well. Thus, to end our session, we see that we have known that puberty and menopause are 2 important phases of life of individual. The puberty is the beginning of the reproductive life, when there are hormone, physical and physiological changes influenced by the gonadal and the adrenal hormone. And this cause of this puberty is mainly the disinhibition of kiss-peptide neuron. Menopause, on the other hand, more protracted in female, is due to the decreased gonadal responsiveness to the gonadotrophin in female, and finally the female lose their reproductive capacity fully and the males may retain it up to 8th or 9th decade. So thank you very much. We are ending this session for today. Thank you very much.